our chant. Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
I will invite the first speaker from Socialist Platform from Georgia.
Уважаемые друзья, я обращаюсь к тем, кто сейчас смотрит на видео, на наших социальных медиа. Хочу сообщить вам, что я приехал из Грузии, из постсоветского пространства. Я приехал от пространства, которое в свое время было объединено, которое называлось великим именем Советский Союз. Я приехал из того пространства, где народы объединились в свое время для того, чтобы построить прогрессивное будущее, человечное общество, построить свободное и справедливое общество. Сейчас мы видим, что народы бывшего Советского Союза разъединены. Они живут по отдельности. И это пространство, оно охвачено множеством противостояний и охвачено кризисом, глубочайшим кризисом. А вот мы вместе были не только во время Советского Союза, но и 200 лет. 200 лет нашей общей истории. Общей истории строительства общего дома, общего пространства. За 200 лет исторически так сложилось, что народ постсоветского пространства, они построили единую экономическую систему, они построили единый дом, единую социальную систему, они в культурном отношении стали ближе, и они в конце концов составили единый народ под названием советский народ. У нас нет другого выхода, кроме как объединиться вновь, кроме как интегрироваться, кроме как наши усилия объединить, чтобы вновь вместе строить общее пространство и общий дом. Что мешает нам? Мешает, конечно, те противостояния, те кризисы, которые привнесены извне внешними силами, а главный наш противник, тот, который хочет это положение, чтобы оно сохранилось у нас, это, конечно, империалист, Запад объединенный и НАТО. Вот почему мы с моими нашими друзьями здесь находимся в Амстердаме, Гаге, Голландии и протестуем против НАТО, против тех, кто сейчас собрался и кто сейчас решает, что НАТО должен усиливаться, должен еще больше вооружаться, должен еще больше становиться монстром, который будет контролировать все и вся в мире. НАТО становится общемировым монстром, общемировым полицейским и жандармом. НАТО является главным препятствием, главным, кто и что мешает постсоветским народам объединиться. Почему? Чтобы мы объединиться, нам объединиться. У нас другого выхода нет. Мы должны объединиться самой сильной, экономически сильной, в первую очередь, страной, которая называется Россия. Поэтому другой альтернативы у нас нет. Другой альтернативы. А эта альтернатива невыгодна тем, которые хотят, чтобы за Россию продлили свою, скажем так, счастливую жизнь. Поэтому я выражаю уверенность большинства, позиции большинства грузинского населения, грузинской общественности. Мы хотим свободы, мы хотим решать свою судьбу сами, мы хотим независимость от Запада, от НАТО. Я уверен, что все свободолюбивые народы снова объединятся и освободятся от того нажима, который они испытывают во всем мире. Поэтому наш лозунг «Долой НАТО, долой империализм». Да здравствует равенство, справедливость и дружба между народами.
Next speech. The contribution of Baltic platform will be read.
Dear comrades, on behalf of our comrades who are struggling in the Baltic states, I would like to address you with a message from the Baltic platform, a member of the World Anti-imperialist platform. This to draw the attention of all those in solidarity in the struggle against NATO, as well as local people, the Dutch people, to the problems not only of a foreign policy nature, but also that our NATO membership affects the internal politics of the member states, and what changes in our everyday lives, the summit going on behind our backs threatens the working class of our countries we. The talking heads of imperialism are about to sign a formal agreement on the infamous 5% of GDP as mandatory spending by each member state to maintain the alliance's military machine. Don't let this number confuse you. These are huge sums. For example, in the case of Latvia, 5% of GDP risks becoming a quarter of the country's already deficit budget. Every European will feel the increase in prices and taxes, deteriorating access to healthcare and basic social services. Is this really what the ordinary people of our countries need? In the name of what? But there is an even more important aspect, which may not be too obvious to people here in the Netherlands and the rest of Western Europe, but is obvious to our people, whose countries are located in the border with Russia, and which NATO is actively turning into a potential battlefield for the coming World War III. This aspect lies in the very essence of NATO troops as imperialist occupation forces. For us, it is quite obvious that the presence of a huge foreign contingent on the territory of our small countries not only is sake of preparation for a conflict with Russia, but first of all, a guarantee of the security of our own ruling class. It is not without reason that at the annual exercise together with local armed forces, not only maneuvers against so-called abstract opposing force are practiced, but also urban battles, suppression of mass riots. Latvia's new military doctrine essentially decriminalizes any possible crimes by foreign NATO contingents against the local population, up to and including shooting on sight. Comrades, brothers, we appeal to you for solidarity, both with the peoples of the countries that are direct victims of NATO aggression, like Palestine and Iran, and also with the peoples of the countries under the de facto occupation of NATO troops from the imperialist core countries, like the Baltic and Balkan countries. Since imperialism will go to any measures to achieve its disgusting aims, anyone, we repeat, anyone, even the Dutch people, risks becoming a victim of aggression, and not of an abstract external aggression, but of the running dogs of its own Western bourgeoisie. Think about that. Down with NATO. Don't leave people's and workers' solidarity.
Next speech will be the AFVN of Netherlands.
Thank you, comrades. Right now, our numbers in opposition to NATO, to the war drive out here today might be small, might not be numerous, but we must always remember that even if we are in the minority, what we are fighting for is and will always be in the interest of the overwhelming majority. And right now, maybe the material conditions in society have not deteriorated to a point yet where people understand that it is in their interest to oppose war, at least not in this country. But fortunately and unfortunately, this is already in the process of happening. So during the Cold War, the working class of the Western European imperialist countries who were loyal to imperialism because through the welfare state their loyalty to imperialism was bought. However, this is no longer the case. Through neoliberalism and financialization, which is not just warfare of finance capital against industrial capital, but also of finance capital against the working class. Social safety nets have been destroyed, public utilities were privatized, broken up and bought and sold off for pieces, and living standards have gotten worse and worse as rent, cost of living, cost of healthcare, cost of energy, cost of groceries have risen exponentially, but wages have stagnated. Already right now we can see in this country that even though many people are not turning out here today, many people are still aware of the fact that something in the way the country is run is not in their interest. The discontent is growing. People are voting for parties that demand change, and even though these parties are not truly revolutionary and they're only selling phony solutions to problems, blaming immigration for lack of housing rather than capitalism, the fact that many people are voting for these parties shows that many people here, even today, are open to this message, open to understanding that something needs to change. Because when it comes to housing, for example, there is truly a problem in this country. Housing, the cost of housing is rising much faster than inflation, much faster than wages, and it becomes unaffordable to even rent a house, leave alone buy a house. However, this is not due to shortage, because even though we have about 35,000 homeless people, we have 350,000 empty houses in this country. This is not a problem of supply and demand, this is a problem of capitalism, where houses are not seen as something to give shelter to families, but as something for speculators to make money on. People will start to understand more and more the connection between these issues, and at some point they will be forced to recognize that only through a rational organization of the economy to serve the needs of man and not to serve the needs of finance, capital and profit, in other words, socialism, only through these solutions can we solve these problems. We must keep building our movement and keep spreading our message, because as the circumstances are changing, the populations of not just this country, but this is happening in many Western countries, will start to understand more and more that the message we have for them, that the system we propose works in their interest and will ultimately bring them salvation from the deterioration of their living standards. Long live international solidarity, down with imperialism.
Yes!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Next speech is from Latin America, Communist Party of Ecuador.
Compatriotas de todo el mundo, hoy nos convoca una urgencia histórica, que se mide en vidas perdidas, ciudades destruidas, soberanías aplastadas, una urgencia que se llama OTAN. That urgency is called NATO, imperialismo occidental. Se llama guerra permanente contra los pueblos que se niegan a asimilar. Permanent war en la caída de la Unión Soviética, nos dijeron que vendría la paz. They told us that el mundo
That the world will become more justice, more safe, more democratic.
Pero lo que vino fue el avance brutal de la OTAN hacia el este.
But what's happening is the NATO expansion on the east,
La militarización de Europa,
militarization of Europe,
la destrucción de Estados soberanos,
the destruction of the sovereign state,
la creación de guerras diseñadas en laboratorios de Washington, Bruselas y Londres.
the creation of the wars and the crisis designed by the servants of Washington, Brussels and London.
La guerra en Ucrania no es un conflicto espontáneo.
The war in Ukraine is not a spontaneous conflict.
Es el resultado directo de décadas de provocaciones,
It's direct result of decades of provocation,
de la expansión agresiva de la OTAN hasta las mismas fronteras de Rusia.
of the expansion of NATO aggression against the front lines of Russia,
Violando los acuerdos de posguerra fría,
violating the treaties after the Cold War.
no se trata de defender la democracia,
It's not about defending the democracy,
sino de someter a Europa a los intereses del Pentágono
but submit Europe to the interests of the Pentagon
y del complejo militar industrial estadounidense.
and the military-industrial complex of the United States.
Ucrania ha sido convertida en el campo de sacrificio por los intereses de los halcones de la guerra.
Ukraine was converted in a battlefield, sacrificing the interests that drive drove it to war.
Pero no termina allí.
They don't finish there.
En Asia Occidental lo llaman Oriente Medio.
In the Eastern nations, they call it Medio Oriente.
Hemos visto cómo la OTAN y sus socios han sembrado muerte y caos.
We saw how the NATO and its socios covered this region in the Pacific South.
Irak, Afganistán, Libia, Siria, Yemen, unas tras otras, las naciones soberanas han sido bombardeadas, sancionadas, invadidas o desestabilizadas.
One after another, the nations, the sovereign nations, was being bombarded, sanctioned, invaded, and destabilized.
Todo en nombre de la paz, la que nunca fue discutida.
All this in the name of peace that actually was never was his goal.
Y ahora con cinismo el imperialismo propone una OTAN asiática
And today, with cynicism, imperialism is proposing Asiatic NATO
para acercar a China, amenazar a Corea del Norte y reavivar los conflictos en Taiwán, la península de Corea.
to in certain China, to isolate North Korea, and to solve the conflict in Taiwan and the Korean Peninsula.
Con la excusa de la seguridad buscan extender su dominio militar global.
With the excuse of security, they look to expand their military domination in the world.
Pero lo que realmente pretenden es contener el ascenso de un mundo multipolar
But what they actually do is to prevent the appearance of the multipolar world,
de un orden basado en la cooperación entre civilizaciones
the one order what is based of the cooperation between the civilizations,
y no en la dominación de una sola.
but not of the domination of only one force.
Incluso el imperialista ya hay contradicciones.
Including inside the core of the imperialists, there are contradictions.
Estados Unidos amenaza con abandonar la OTAN
The United States are threatening to abandon the NATO
cuando no les sirve directamente.
when it doesn't serve it directly.
Francia propone un paraguas nuclear europeo
France has proposed the nuclear umbrella, European nuclear umbrella.
y un intento de disputar el liderazgo en
She has tried to make a strategic leadership.
esta fractura nos indica una cosa.
These things are pointing us one thing.
El imperio ya no es sólido.
The empire is not strong anymore.
La hegemonía se hunde sola en una grieta.
The hegemony is converted to dust.
Frente a esta ofensiva mundial no podemos callar.
In front of that world offensive, we cannot calm down.
No podemos permitir que la narrativa imperialista defina la historia.
We cannot permit the imperialist narrative to define history.
Debemos alzar la voz, denunciar, movilizar, organizarnos los pueblos,
We have to raise our voice to denunciate, to mobilize, to organize the people.
porque cada base de la OTAN es una amenaza de la paz.
Because every major base is a threat to the peace.
Cada bombardeo disfrazado de intervención humanitaria es un crimen contra la humanidad.
Every bombardment in the name of the humanitarian intervention is a crime against humanity.
Cada expansión militar es un acto de colonización.
Every military expansion is an act of colonization.
La lucha contra la OTAN es parte inseparable de la lucha por la libertad de nuestro pueblo.
The struggle against NATO is inseparable from the struggle for liberation of our people.
Hoy más que nunca debemos construir una gran alianza internacional de los pueblos.
Today, as never before, we have to build an alliance, big alliance, international alliance of the peoples in the world.
Movimientos y gobiernos que rechacen el territorio.
Movements and governments that are denying war,
Defienda la soberanía y abracen la solución de paz.
they're defense sovereignty and they're welcoming the future with justice, the future of the justice.
Por una Palestina libre,
For a free Palestine,
por una zona libre de armas atómicas en el Oriente Medio.
for one zone free of nuclear weapons in the Middle East,
No al bloqueo a Cuba,
no to the blockade on Cuba,
por disolución de la OTAN.
for the dissolution of NATO,
Abajo la OTAN,
down with NATO,
abajo el imperialismo,
down with imperialism,
por la unidad imperialista de los pueblos,
for the anti-imperialist unity of the people,
hasta la victoria siempre.
for the victory forever.
Next speech is the New Communist Party of Yugoslavia.
Dear comrades and dear friends, in these days in Hague, gathering all levels in the world, NATO summit, gathering all, we can say, bad guys who wants to make new plans against the freedom countries, sovereignty countries, and socialist countries. There exists a very long list destroyed by NATO. They bombed Yugoslavia, they bombed Afghanistan, they destroyed Iraq, destroyed Syria, destroyed a lot of other countries, and we can see how they manipulate with the historical facts and how they want to represent that they fight for the human rights and democracy. The same politics who speak about humanitarian actions, humanitarian interventions, they do it with depleting uranium, with the cluster bombs, without problems. We can see what is the result of their so-called actions. The result that a lot of people died, that a lot of civilians died, and we can see in the war between Zionists and Iran that Zionists killed 90% of the civilians. That means human rights and democracy for them. Also in my region, in the Balkans, they occupied our region, occupied with NATO bases. And NATO bases control our economies and market. That's the point why NATO exists. NATO is a tool of the Western imperialism, and NATO needs to protect Western imperialism from the liberation from the people. All in all, we can see that imperialists are united, and also we need to be united if we want to destroy them. All progressive forces, all anti-imperialist forces need to have the same goal. That means that we need to fight with them, because if NATO exists, we can't speak about the freedom, we can't speak about social justice. What does it mean? We need to say from here, massive solidarity for all people in the world, for all countries who fight against the NATO. With solidarity with brave Cuban people, with solidarity with brave Venezuelan people, Nicaraguan people,
who are victims of Western imperialism. We need to solidarity with the people of Yemen, of Palestine, of Iran, of all peoples in the Western Asia who fight against the Western imperialism and NATO. We need to solidarity with the brave people of Donbass and Russia who fight against the NATO and against proxy state in Ukraine. Also, we need to solidarity with all socialist countries, with China, with Vietnam, Laos, and People's Republics of Korea. We need to be united. We need to destroy the NATO. Down low with NATO. Long live anti-imperialist struggle.
Down with NATO! Down with NATO! Down with NATO!
Down with NATO.
Down with NATO!
Down with NATO.
Down with NATO!
Down with NATO.
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO.
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO.
We will continue our struggle till the end of this NATO summit. Thank you, comrades.